I see some people screaming and hollering, talking about the building was on fire. So when I come out, this guy had jumped out the window with his baby in his arms. He jumped from the third floor window, and him and the baby was laying over on the ground. So what I did, I went over there and tried to help him with the baby, but I don't know. I think the baby might have died. I'm not for sure.
And how was he?
I don't know. After that, the fire department came. But the fire department came. I was trying to go get a ladder so I could get the people off the third floor because they couldn't get out because the fire was at the front door and they couldn't get out. So before I could get my ladder, the fire department came and we told them where the people was on the third floor trying to get out the building.
I heard dogs barking in a fire truck.
Yeah.
And I thought my fan had caught in fire in my apartment.
Okay.
And so I looked out on the hallway and there was smoke filling the hallway as well. And I thought, well, this is not my apartment, so I better get out of here. And because I didn't see any fire in the apartment. And then as I went down the hallway, it got worse. I couldn't tell exactly what apartment it was coming from, but I noticed there was some smoke coming from under one of the doors. And then I just came outside.
Syria's civil war appears to be entering a dangerous new phase as the Assad regime's forces battle Kurdish troops who are U.S. partners for control of Hasaka in the northeast. Holly Williams reports the U.S. may be drawn into this battle.
A new front has opened up in Syria's civil war as Syrian regime planes bomb Kurdish fighters. And the two sides battle street to street on the ground. The Kurdish group is backed by the US in the fight against ISIS, and American special forces operate in the region, so the US scrambled fighter jets to protect them. But that risks a direct clash in the air with the Syrian regime, which America has strenuously tried to avoid. 5 years into Syria's civil war, this multi-sided conflict is more chaotic than ever. It's also again spilling into neighbouring countries like Turkey, where on Saturday a suicide bomber targeted a wedding party, killing more than 50, including at least 22 children. Turkey initially suspected ISIS, but tonight the Prime Minister said it could have been another group. The US and its Kurdish allies have made progress against ISIS, killing thousands of fighters and clawing back territory. But even if ISIS loses all its territory in Syria, that won't end the civil war. The Syrian regime is thought to have killed far more people than ISIS and is now backed by firepower from its ally Russia, ensuring it'll keep bombing its own people, perhaps for years to come. Secretary of State John Kerry said today that talks with Russia on possible military cooperation in Syria are drawing to a close. But Maurice, many are sceptical about Moscow's intentions because its goal appears to be to prop up the Syrian regime.
Holly Williams in Istanbul tonight. Holly,
possible ISIS-inspired attack in Virginia. The FBI investigating a suspect who was known to authorities and is now accused of stabbing 2 people on Saturday night. ABC's David Wright is here with the latest on that. Good morning, David.
Good morning, Amy. Apparently, he didn't just stab them. Authorities now believe he tried to behead his victims. The FBI now suspects this knife attack may have been an act of terrorism inspired by ISIS. An urgent call for paramedics in the immediate aftermath of a knife attack Saturday night.
There's two patients, one with a leg laceration who's got a tourniquet applied by police, and one male subject with a neck laceration.
A couple returning home to their apartment at the Pines complex in Roanoke told police a stranger jumped them. Witnesses say the attacker shouted Allahu Akbar, God is great, as he wielded his knife, seriously injuring both people. 20-year-old Wasil Faruqi is now in custody. Sources tell ABC News the FBI is investigating whether the suspect was trying to behead his victims in an ISIS-inspired assault. Federal authorities say they've been aware of Faruqi for some time and that during the past year he traveled to Turkey and may have tried to sneak into Syria, where ISIS has been recruiting and training foreign sympathizers.
They seek to send operatives to kill people in their name in the United States if they can.
The FBI director recently warned that ISIS is reaching out to troubled souls worldwide, hoping to recruit potential killers.
If they can't send an operative or inspire someone to travel, they hope to motivate people to kill on their behalf.
The FBI director says that the Bureau is currently tracking about 800 people in all 50 states who have consumed ISIS propaganda online. The tricky part for them is trying to figure out who was just watching it and who might be motivated to act.
So disturbing.
Terrible.
Terrifying home invasion caught on a nanny cam. A burglar with an assault rifle breaking into a home. Police believe this was just one of his stops in Georgia. And ABC's Steve Osinsami has the latest.
Georgia investigators this morning are hoping someone who sees this video can identify this gunman caught on a nanny cam robbing a young couple's home in Atlanta. Watch as the man is seen here entering the home while the family was away with what police believe is an AK-47. Police say he stole a flat screen, a laptop, and jewelry.
He seems to be by himself, as far as we know. We're not sure.
But this isn't where police say he began thieving. Investigators say this same man is a suspect in at least 3 other robberies 4 miles up the road. And just an hour earlier, police believe he was robbing another home. And this time, Barbara Lyles Anderson was home.
He said, lay down on the bed with your face in the pillow. And that's when I thought, okay, he's going to rape me and then he's going to murder me.
She says he got in through an unlocked door in the kitchen, put the gun in her face, and kept her in the bedroom while he searched for cash, jewelry, and then walked off with her flat-screen TV.
I started to cry a little bit, and he said, that was after I'd given him everything, and he said, don't cry, you'll be okay, I'm leaving.
Police also believe he's the same person who robbed a woman a week ago in a park nearby. They produced this police sketch to help find the suspect, and they're underlining this morning how helpful these home surveillance videos can be. For Good Morning America, Steve Osinsami, ABC News, Atlanta.
Wow, boy, is that frightening. Our thanks to Steve Osinsami.
Joining us now is Mark Weber. He's the director of the Institute for Historical Review, and he joins us via Skype from California. Hey, thanks for joining us here on Press TV, Mr. Weber. Now, before I start off with the comments made by the Control Arms Coalition, I want to touch on what these lawmakers in the U.S. have said as far as the Saudi aggression on Yemen is largely seen as a U.S. campaign. What do you make of that?
This is an important aspect of all of this. The U.S. support for the Saudi Kingdom's war in Yemen should be a really major scandal, because even though most Americans don't seem to have much concern for the legal or moral aspects of this conflict, every American should be very concerned, because this policy of support for Saudi Arabia is bound to intensify hatred of the U.S. in the region and thereby fuel anti-American terrorism. And that's underscored by the point you made about how many people in Yemen view the attacks by the Saudi bombers in Yemen as really attacks by the United States, because Saudi Arabia would not be able to carry out these bombings and its intervention in Yemen without continued strong U.S. military support, as your report pointed out.
Right now, despite this logistical support, the U.S. has been, as we just mentioned here as well, selling weapons to Saudi Arabia. Now, when the coalition, the Control Arms Coalition, that is, calls the U.S. hypocritical when it sells these arms to Saudi Arabia, what does it exactly mean?
Well, best you ask them, but I suppose the main point is the United States pursues policies and has for many years that are in crass contrast to its stated goals. I mean, the United States, for example, claims to be against the proliferation of nuclear weapons, but it maintains this policy of so-called ambiguity about Israel's illegal nuclear weapons stockpile. The United States has countenanced the development of nuclear weapons by Pakistan and India. The United States, in fact, is violating the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty on Nuclear Weapons, which requires the United States to make good efforts to eliminate nuclear weapons altogether. But the United States has actually been increasing its nuclear stockpile. But, I mean, the general point is, with regard to U.S. policy on many fronts, Israel, Palestine, so forth, the United States claims to support certain principles and goals, but its actual policies are in crass contradiction to those stated goals.
And before I let you go, Mr. Weber, of course, when we talk about logistical support and arms sales and deepening of relations between the U.S. and Saudi Arabia, is this a direct green light to Saudi Arabia's aggression in Yemen? And if so, then is the U.S. just as complicit when it comes to the war crimes that are happening over there?
Well, I mean, the United States makes it possible. It's hard to know what fine-tuning and exact statements are being made by American officials to Yemen. There are indications that what Saudi Arabia is doing is even somewhat embarrassing to American politicians, but that's not enough to change this fundamental policy of U.S. Virtually blank check support for Saudi Arabia. So it does bear a grave responsibility, of course, not as much, I suppose, in the case of Yemen, as the actual bombers of the Saudi Arabia Air Force carrying out the bombs. But overall, of course, the United States has this major responsibility, because without U.S. backing and support, Saudi Arabia could not carry out these actions in Yemen and other policies.
Okay, that's Mark Weber, Director of the Institute for Historical Review, joining us via Skype from California. Mr. Weber, it's always a pleasure having you with us here on Press TV.
Today on Press TV, Syria accuses certain regional countries of supporting terrorist groups fighting against government forces in the country. Syria's envoy to the UN, Bashar Jafari, said terrorist groups backed by Turkey, Qatar and Saudi Arabia ruined monuments and broke up factories in Syria. The UN aid chief, meanwhile, has hailed Russia's proposal for a ceasefire in the Syrian city of Aleppo, saying the world body is ready to deliver aid to the people trapped in the flashpoint city. Stephen O'Brien, however, urged the warring sides to commit to the 48-hour humanitarian truce. The Israeli military has conducted an airstrike, pounding positions belonging to the Syrian army in the Golan Heights region. The Israeli army claims the attack was in response to stray fire that landed in the occupied Golan Heights. No injuries have been reported. Turkey strongly denounces Israel's latest blitz on the Gaza Strip in response to an alleged rocket fire from the besieged enclave. Israel, however, rejected Turkey's criticism as, quote, baseless. The dispute comes days after the Turkish parliament approved an agreement to normalize diplomatic ties with Israel. A group campaigning for stricter arms sales controls accuses major world powers, including the US, of breaking international law by selling huge quantities of weapons to Saudi Arabia amid rising civilian casualties. Meanwhile, a number of senior US congressmen slammed the White House for supporting the deadly Saudi war on Yemen. North Korea threatens to launch a preemptive nuclear strike in the face of the ongoing joint military drills between South Korea and the United States. Pyongyang says it's ready to mount an attack at what it called all enemy combat groups. It described the drills as preparations for invasion. Pakistan forces a large number of Afghan refugees to leave the country, accusing them of harboring terrorists in their camps. Opposition parties have criticized the decision. They say refugees should be allowed to stay in Pakistan until peace is restored in Afghanistan. Pakistan has been home to millions of Afghan refugees for decades. And Italy, France and Germany have pledged to work together to overcome enormous challenges the European Union is facing in the wake of Britain's vote to leave the bloc. The three leaders made the comments during a meeting in Italy, which was held to discuss the impacts of Brexit. Those are the latest here on Press TV.
Yemeni government has held a press conference titled "Saudi blockade is an unforgivable crime" to highlight the impacts of Saudi blockade and attacks on the country's healthcare service. In the press, Yemeni government strongly denounced the Saudi aerial ban on flights.
Saudi Arabia has banned all flights from Yemen since August 9th. By such move, Saudi Arabia has violated all international laws and norms that has led to an increase of humanitarian suffering of Yemeni civilians. Over 7,600 Yemenis, mostly patients, are still stranded in international airports, whereas 9,500 others are in desperate need for treatment abroad or face imminent death.
Saudi Arabia has intensified its airstrikes in recent weeks. On Monday, a whole family was killed in aerial bombardments of residential area in the southern Taiz province. Earlier this week, dozens of people also lost their lives in airstrikes in Razah district of Sada province. Observers say civilians are the main victims of Saudi attacks.
The latest Saudi massacres on civilians in Taiz and Sada is an evidence that proves Saudi failure that prompted the rich monarchy to increase its bombardments of civilian areas in a bid to put more pressure on the Ansarullah group and the country's army to stop their reprisal operations deep inside Saudi territories, who are resolute to end Saudi aggression by all means, after the Yemeni diplomats have exploited all peaceful means.
According to the United Nations, around half of Yemen's 27 million population have no access to health care and are unable to put enough food on the table. While about 80% need humanitarian aid, the war has driven 2.8 million people from their homes. Saudi Arabia says that its war on Yemen is aimed at bringing back the country's former government. However, its bombardment campaign has left nothing but a trail of death and destruction. Mohammed Attab, Press TV, Sana'a.